So, I was a very stressed out, nervous little kid, and a stressed out, nervous adult also. But that meant that when I was a kid, my favorite American Girl doll books were not their famous line of historical fiction novels, it was their famous line of advice books. I was obsessed with the American Girl advice books. There was a period of time where I collected all of them. And then at a certain point, I outgrew them and I got rid of them all. But recently I've been feeling nostalgic, so I went on thrift books and I purchased all of them. This isn't this there's another little stack over there, but this is most of them. We're going to put them down. We're good. Nothing fell. So I have now read all of the American Girl Smart Girls guidebooks and most of their other advice books. And so I thought we could take a trip down memory lane and get some advice from the American Girl Company. Our story starts in 1992 when American Girl launched their magazine. This magazine was aimed at girls 8 and up, and it had short stories, paper dolls, instructions for crafts, reader submissions, and an advice column called Help! Exclamation point. And this was a very successful magazine. I guess with the caveat, during the period of time when magazines still mattered. It was a big deal in its heyday, but it did end in 2019. Then, in 1995, American Girl launched their Girl of Today line. In the 1995 issue of the catalog where they announced this line, it says that the magazine was the inspiration. And now, it's the inspiration for something new, a catalog boutique full of goodies just for you. The American Girl of Today line included American Girl Gear, which was clothes for girls, the Girl of Today line of dolls. You may know them as Just Like You dolls or Truly Me dolls. These were unique to the American Girl brand because these dolls are not characters. They don't have names, books, or backstories. They're meant to be generic modern girls. And the American Girl of Today line also included the American Girl Library. This was described as a bright new batch of books based on the most popular features of American Girl magazine. This was American Girl branching out into publishing books that were more lifestyle content as opposed to historical fiction. These first books included an activity and riddle book, a craft instruction book, a birthday card kit, and a diary and scrapbook. And of course, an advice book. So now, let's talk about American Girl's first advice book, Help! An absolutely indispensable guide to life for girls. The catalog says, American Girl magazine receives over 1,000 letters a month addressed to the Help column. Here's a book full of them, with the thoughtful answers you count on. This book is by Nancy Holyoke and illustrated by Scott Nash. Side note, Nancy really is the American Girl advice expert. She was the founding editor of the American Girl magazine and has written tons of their advice books. So this book is very small and rectangular. Well, I mean, all books for the most part, are horizontal. And the structure of the book is there are a bunch of questions that people have written into American Girl magazine, usually about a sentence long, with a handwritten sign-off, asking for advice on a variety of topics. American Girl likes to include questions from real girls in basically all of these books, and hot take, I think that these are all real. I think a lot of people doubt whether advice columns or reader submissions are actually real and not just invented by the author. But at least when it comes to American Girl, we know for a fact that they were getting tons and tons of letter submissions. I don't know if they still get that many anymore, but we know that people were writing in. Now, were these questions sometimes maybe edited? Yes, I think so. We know that they sometimes edit questions to preserve the asker's anonymity and privacy, so it'll say, like, some of the details in this story were changed. And I think it's possible that questions also may have been edited for, like, brevity. When it comes to the Help book, these questions don't follow any particular theme. One page is advice on how to clean a messy room, and another page is advice on how to forgive your friend's mom after she ran over your dog. Absolutely no organization, just random questions and constant whiplash. Some of the topics that these questions cover include family troubles like divorce and siblings, babysitting tips, friendship conflicts, advice on staying home alone, money, like how to save money, starting middle school, and boys. I would like to read to you now my favorite question in this book. Dear Help, my teacher is very sexist against girls. Just today, he said to a girl named Catherine after she threw the football, "You throw like a girl." I said, "What?" And he said, "Oh, our little women's right movement person is back there. You know, and so do I, that you can't talk back to teachers. But what do I do?" Elizabeth. "Oh, Miss Gloria Steinem back there thinks she can throw a football." Like, what the hell? This was only 1995. Here is the advice that they gave, just so you know. Talk to your parents. Ask if they will come with you to talk to the teacher. They can say to him what seems obvious to you. A bad throw is not the same thing as a girl's throw. It's insulting to girls to say that it is. Your parents may want to talk to the principal, too. In the meantime, don't let this man change how you play sports or think about yourself. Not one teeny tiny bit. The advice in this book is very solid. It's just kind of a chaotic reading experience. Then in 1996, we get some more books. At this point, all of the books are aesthetically white with bold primary colors. They have the titles really big on the front. They publish a sequel to Help called More Help. Here's How, which is tutorials on how to do a bunch of different tricks. And we have The Care and Keeping of Friends. This does not specify a particular author. It's just by the American Girl Library. I guess it was like a group project. And the illustrator is Nadine Bernard Westcott. In this era, American Girl really loved these scribbly, cartoony illustrations, and we're really keeping with the bright colors. This book is about making friends, dealing with fights, and ideas of things to do together. They have some craft ideas for things you could make with or for your friends, and one of them is this hideous yarn doll. I don't think your friend wants that. Maybe just make a friendship bracelet or something. This is also the beginning of the advice books having quizzes in them. So the quizzes in this book are about what you would do in certain friendship situations and what kind of a friend you are. Almost all of the books from here on out have quizzes in them. In 1997, we get Groom Your Room, which is tips on decorating and organizing, and Oops! Exclamation point, The Manners Guide for Girls. Then in 1998, we get the one, the only, The Care and Keeping of You. She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. This book is by Valerie Lee Schaefer and illustrated by Norm Bendel. I'm sure you know this, but it is a book about taking care of your body and puberty. Apparently the backstory on this book is that Pleasant Rowland, the founder of American Girl, and at the time the CEO, was reading a newspaper on a plane, and there was an article about how more and more girls were getting puberty earlier. And Pleasant Rowland ripped the page out of the newspaper and put a sticky note on it that said, "We need to do something about this now." And because it's American Girl, they decided to make an educational book. The American Girl magazine was apparently also getting a lot of submissions asking about puberty, which was another reason that they wanted to make the book. This book is organized into sections based on different areas of the body, and the end of each section has questions from girls and advice. The book covers acne, braces, shaving, breasts, eating disorders, and periods. I think some of these illustrations I probably can't show on YouTube, even though they are educational diagrams. Just feels kind of risky. But this book has the iconic boob growth chart that shows the different stages of development. It talks about getting a bra that fits. And in the Q&A section, one girl asks about if she should stuff her bra, which is so sad. Is that a thing girls still do and worry about? That feels so like teen 80s movie to me. Not that I've watched any teen 80s movies, but I don't think that's as much of a thing. The book also has a diagram about how to insert a tampon. The writing style of the book is very straightforward. They're not using any euphemisms, they're using anatomical terms, and it's apparently meant to sound like a cool aunt, a woman who's older than you and wiser, but still friendly and approachable. I think The Care and Keeping of You is one of the most important things American Girl has ever done. It has sold millions of copies. It has become the puberty book. Even if you never had a doll, never read a historical novel, you probably had this book. Which I know people have a range of emotions towards this book. I think a lot of parents would use this book as sort of a substitute for talking to their kids. They would like give them the book and then be like, all right, good luck. That was thankfully not my experience. This book was like a resource and a jumping off point, but I had a lot of open conversations with my mom. Then in 1999, we get The Babysitter's Handbook, Care and Keeping of Kids. It's funny, since The Care and Keeping of You was such a big deal, I assumed that all of their other Care and Keeping of titles were based on that. but Care and Keeping of Friends was first. So Care and Keeping of You was a title referencing a previous book. Then there's Help, A Girl's Guide to Her Parents' Divorce, Good Sports, about sportsmanship, and Oh Brother, Oh Sister, about getting along with your siblings. Then in 2000, we get School Smarts. This is by Brooks Whitney and illustrated by Tracy McGinnis. This book is illustrated in a collage style, including photos of girls, which I wonder if those were submissions to the magazine. And the book gives a ton of advice about doing well in school, like how to take notes and stay organized. School Smarts ended up getting a lot of companion books, books about projects and math, and my favorite, Writing Smarts. Writing Smarts is from 2002 and written by Carrie Madden, again illustrated by Tracy McGinnis, and it gives advice on grammar and creative writing. And the reason this is my favorite is not because I enjoy writing, which I do, but because my older cousins had this book before me, and this is their copy. So there's a bunch of pages where you're supposed to fill in creative writing prompts, like write an acrostic poem, write about something that makes you angry. And one of my cousins filled in most of this book, and then another cousin went in and wrote stuff in the blank spots. And so it's such a fun little time capsule. No one else is going to have that experience with this book, but it's my video. This is my book. And that's why I feel nostalgic for it. Then, in 2001, we get the first Smart Girls Guidebook. This has become American Girl's long-running advice book series, and they started out with a Smart Girl's Guide to Boys. It's written by Nancy Holyoke and illustrated by Bonnie Timmons. This book goes over crushes, how to talk to a boy, your social life, and having a boyfriend. This book starts out with a 2-page spread called A Typical Day. This comes up in a couple of the Smart Girls Guidebooks. It describes a hypothetical day with timestamps, showing all the different times the topic of the book might come up in a single day. I'd say the main advice in this book is to not be weird. Talk to boys like they're people. There's a part of the book with a weirdo meter, ranking how weird different behaviors are, like giggling constantly or staring at the wall. There's not a ton of examples in this book, but American Girl sometimes says to make a joke as a conversation starter or to diffuse an embarrassing situation. The problem is that American Girl and these advice books are trying to be as non-controversial and kid-friendly as possible. These books are generally 8 and up or 10 and up, so their examples of jokes are usually very lame. And unfortunately, when I'm reading these jokes in my head, I'm always imagining an awkward little girl who needs guidance for social situations from a doll company advice book, and she's like reading these jokes and practicing them like, I'm gonna really kill it. Everyone's gonna think this is funny. So the jokes sound even lamer in my head because I'm reading them as like an awkward 8-year-old girl. Here are some American Girl conversation starters. Okay, no more Jell-O and science projects. My cell model looks like it escaped from a horror movie. I wish they'd teach us more about the Vikings. So you saw that show? How do you think they got the dog to drink the Coke? I'm just reading it like, oh, honey. This book is also the only American Girl book to have quotes from boys. We have some wisdom from boys about what they're looking for in a girl. Someone who's attractive, funny, and nice. She has to not drag me into malls. Joey, age 13. Joey, just let her shop for clothes while you go in GameStop and then meet up in the food court, alright? It's not that big of a deal. Someone who likes me for me and doesn't care what I look like. Adam, age 13. Aw, he's ugly. There's also examples of trouble in a relationship, and the quotes from boys are all like, when a girl calls too much. If they have to call, they should call once and get the whole story, not call 5 times. And the most annoying thing is that sparkly eyeshadow. Makeup should be worn in moderation. Andrew, age 13. Andrew, you sound really annoying. Meanwhile, all the girl quotes are like, when he ignores you, or when he flirts with other girls in front of you. There's a quiz in this book about whether you're feeling rushed. And maybe you're not interested in boys yet. And in my head, I'm like, yeah. Maybe you're not interested in boys at all. Maybe that's the problem. Have you considered that? I didn't have to consider it. I knew immediately, but I know for some of you it's more of a journey. This book also has some good safety tips. Like, it's not okay to have a romantic relationship with a guy who's older than you. People might not be who they say they are online, and things can be forwarded and shared online. Since this book is from 2001, they're not talking about pictures. They're just talking about like text-based emails. Don't say something in an email that you might regret it being shared. The book also talks a little bit about harassment and tells you to get help. I love it when these books say to talk to a trusted adult. I think as a kid, I was like, ugh, they don't need to keep saying that. Like, I know, but now as an adult reading these, I'm like, they need to mention it more. Basically, every book, they need to say at least once, you're 8 years old. This problem is bigger than you. You need to go talk to a grown-up. It's lame advice to hear when you're a kid, but it's true. And sometimes they don't give that advice when I think they should. This is foreshadowing. I don't even think that's that. I'm just telling you. Then in 2002, we get The Feelings book. The Feelings book is a companion book to The Care and Keeping of You. They ended up doing quite a few companion books, including workbook journal type things and Q&A advice books. But The Feelings book is by Dr. Linda Madison and illustrated by Norm Bendel. I had this book as a kid because I had a lot of feelings. This book gives the science behind feelings, like your amygdala and your hormones. There's information about identifying and dealing with feelings. Girls ask for advice about different emotions. And it talks about therapists, psychiatrists, and psychologists. It says that if talking with friends and family doesn't help, it may be time for professional help, which I think is good advice. Then in 2002, we get Yikes! Exclamation point. A Smart Girl's Guide to Sticky Situations. I think at this point they were still kind of thinking, like, help, oops, yikes. But then they realized that the Smart Girl's Guide branding was superior, so in 2005, the title dropped the yikes, and it's just A Smart Girl's Guide to Sticky Situations. It is by the editors of American Girl, so another group project, and illustrated by Bonnie Timmons. This book has advice for dealing with stressful or embarrassing situations. This book is vaguely organized into sections, but the sections are like quick thinking, using logic, and then the advice in the sections has nothing to do with each other. And sometimes the advice includes a disaster blaster, which is a tip for preventing a disaster. So there's advice for forgetting your lines on stage, and there's a disaster blaster about understanding your character's motivations so that you're more likely to remember your lines. There's advice on if you're over or underdressed, and for some reason these illustrations really made an impression on me. I remember them so vividly. If you fall down the stairs in front of a million people, it says to crack a joke, such as, "Who are you? I think I have amnesia. Guess I can't take the history test. I'm a professional stunt woman. Don't try this at home. Next time I'm taking the elevator." There's advice on periods, like if you bleed through your clothes or if you drop a tampon in the hallway. There's advice on a bunch of very terrifying situations that I hated as a kid, like natural disasters, tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes. If your ride doesn't show up, which is like 2002, so they're like, try to find a payphone. If it's been hours, you might have to knock on front doors of houses. Try and look for ones that have kids' toys in the front yard. I'm like, oh my god. If you're lost in the big city or on a hike. Terrible. All of it. I hate it. There's also advice on removing stains. And my favorite, rip currents. Children's media always feels the need to explain rip current safety. It's just one of those things you're meant to remember as a kid. Like, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Swim parallel to the shore if you're caught in a rip current. I mean, I guess it's nice that I have that information, but it will never, ever, ever be relevant in my life. Then in 2003, we have Friendship Troubles by Patty Kelly Criswell and illustrated by Angela Martini. This is about what makes a good friend, fights, and bullies. The book also contains a few friendship files. These are stories of girls with friendship problems. I believe these are stories that people had written into the magazine with. My favorite story is when a girl is being bullied by her friends for not being cool enough. And they're like, do you even own a pair of capris? Because it's 2003. The book has a lot of questions from girls, quizzes about being a good friend, advice on being respectful, communicating your feelings, and not gossiping. When they talk about fights, one of the pages says, the Chinese word for crisis also contains the word for opportunity. It also gives the standard advice to ignore bullies, but adds the caveat that at a certain point you do need to get grown-ups involved. In 2004, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Starting Middle School. This is by Julie Williams and illustrated by Angela Martini. This is about the transition from elementary school to middle school. For my international viewers, kids go to middle school from about ages 11 to 13. So everybody's going through puberty, they're getting ready to be a teenager, the schoolwork's getting harder. It's a very stressful time. This book has advice on being organized, navigating a bigger school. It also has instructions on how to use a combination lock for a locker. I hate combination locks. I'm so bad at them. At all the schools I went to, nobody really used their regular locker. I mean, people did, but generally, I think if you were to take a survey of the student body, most people didn't. In middle school, there were a lot of limitations as to when we could access our lockers, so I think a lot of people just found it inconvenient. And in high school, it was such a big campus, you wouldn't really have time to go from one class to another and also to the locker. So at least for me, the only time I would use a locker would be for PE class. We would have a locker in the changing room area where you were supposed to keep your gym clothes and stuff, which I'm a very sweaty person and also weird about clothes. So I just like brought fresh gym clothes every day. I probably could have brought a bunch of gym clothes and stored them in the locker and then taken a bunch of laundry home at the end of the week. I don't know. I'm not saying I was doing everything right, but I had to use the combination lock, the built-in combination lock on the locker to get into the PE locker. Because even though I wasn't storing a bunch of clothes in there, when I changed into my gym clothes, I would have to put my backpack and normal clothes into the locker during the course of PE. Am I over-explaining this? I'm hearing myself talking and this is stupid. Anyway, I really hated using the combination lock on the locker. I'm not good at it. It stressed me out so bad. I never really got good at it. And I remember looking at the instructions in this book and being like, oh my god, no. This book also has, unrelated to lockers, other advice. Advice on more homework, asking teachers for help, making new friends, and school dances. American Girl loves to talk about boy-girl dances. They bring them up in the Smart Girl's Guide to Boys. Like, oh my god, you're going to a boy-girl dance. Just act normal, even though there's boys here. Then, in 2005, we get a Smart Girl's Guide to Manners. If you remember, in 1997, there was Oops, the Manners Guide for Girls, and this is based on that. This book is by Nancy Holyoke and illustrated by Kathy Mingus. The beginning of the book says, manners aren't a bunch of rules dreamed up by fusspots who want to cramp your style. How do you do, fellow kids? This book basically advises you to be polite, show deference to older people, and to keep your opinions to yourself. Because this is an advice book for kids, there's a lot in here about being respectful to adults and also treating them like people. Don't ignore your friend's mom like she's a floor lamp. And don't ask nosy questions or blurt out every opinion you have. Sort of the kids say the darndest things problem. One of my favorite parts of this book is there's a quiz which gives a bunch of questions and you're supposed to decide whether they're too nosy or not. How much does your cat weigh? How much do you weigh? Why did your dad get fired? Was he bad at his job or something? There's also advice on phone etiquette. This is 2005, so they mean phone calls, not texting, though they do mention email. There's advice on table manners, being out in public, attending special events, and being a good host and a good guest. Even at boy-girl parties, oh no! There's also advice on gifts, and they say to write a thank you note, and their example thank you note is such a fun piece of world building. Dear Aunt Margot, thanks a lot for the sweater. I wore it to school on Tuesday and got a lot of compliments. Snails are the best. Who would have thought to put them on a sweater? How are you and Uncle Mort? Has he finished the doghouse he was building for Bullwinkle? Dad has been elected secretary of the Iris Society. Mom got her cast off. Her leg is better, but she still walks with a limp. She says hi. Thanks again for the great sweater. I'll really enjoy it. Love, Chrissy. Feel like I know so much about Chrissy's life. Then, in 2006, we get Friends, Making Them and Keeping Them. This is by Patty Kelly Criswell and illustrated by Stacy Peterson. I wanted to bring up this book mainly because I had it as a kid, and I've always thought the art style is so cute. And I also love the color scheme of the book. Also in 2006, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Money, again by Nancy Holyoke, and illustrated by Allie Douglas. I love her art style. It's so 2000s. Very sleek and stylized. In 1998, American Girl had a book called Moneymakers, Good Sense for Girls, which was their previous money advice book. My dad has said that he was excited to give me A Smart Girl's Guide to Money when I was a kid. He was like, ooh, a book about money. The book is about spending and saving responsibly and ideas for running a business. When it comes to making money, the book talks about an allowance and how to ask for one. They have girls give their thoughts on an allowance, and some of the girls are like, I don't think girls should get an allowance. Our parents do so much for us. We shouldn't ask for anything in return. I was like, girl, no one is going to agree with you. Then there's advice on starting a business. It explains expenses versus income and profit, gives a ton of different business ideas, explains the different roles you might have in a business, and advice for dealing with customers and business partners. I don't have any of my childhood copies of any of these books other than Writing Smarts. And so these are all thrifted, and some of them have writing in them, or in the case of this book, a bunch of dog-eared pages. All of the pages about starting a business were dog-eared. I hope whoever owned this book, her business went well. This book also gives ideas for business cards, and you could go on the American Girl website and use their templates to design advertising materials, which I think is very cute. This book also talks about responsible spending, and they have a quiz where you have received $75 in birthday money, and the quiz gives you options of different items you could buy, and you subtract that from your total and see how much money you're left with at the end. Then in 2007, there is A Smart Girl's Guide to Understanding Her Family by Amy Lynch and illustrated by Lauren Schauer. In my mind, she is one of the American Girl illustrators. I think I was a fan during the time frame when she was doing a lot of work for them, so I feel like I saw her art everywhere. My favorite that she illustrated were probably the mini mystery books, which were collections of mystery short stories that you were meant to solve. Apparently now she's really into chickens, according to her website. A Smart Girl's Guide to Understanding Her Family has advice on getting along with your family, communicating, and learning about them. Understand that they are also people. There's pages for you to fill in information about your family members, a checklist of various things your family might be going through. It says to share with them and spend time with them. And there's tips on communicating, like expressing yourself calmly, waiting for a good time to talk, and regulating your emotions. This book weirdly feels shorter than a lot of the other books, and a lot of the information is very generic. It almost reminds me of Friendship Troubles in the sense that it's about communication and maintaining relationships. But that book had a lot of example situations, more ideas for spending time together, more quizzes. This book just feels kind of light on content, possibly because they know that everyone's family situation is different, and so they wanted just generic information about conflict resolution and spending time with each other. But even then, this book was useless to me as a kid. My family gets along great, and we spend lots of time together. So I remember reading this book as a kid and being like, well, that was stupid. I'm sure it's not stupid for other people, but it was stupid for me. In 2009, we have Stand Up for Yourself and Your Friends by Patty Kelly Criswell. Again, illustrated by Angela Martini, but in a completely different art style. Before she was doing those flat colors with black outlines. These look a lot more like they were drawn with a pencil. This is another American Girl art style that I feel like came up a lot when I was a kid. Stand Up for Yourself and Your Friends is about bullying. The context here is that the 2009 American Girl Doll of the Year was named Krissa, and her story was about bullying. So this was sort of a tie-in book to the Krissa Girl of the Year collection. They wanted to talk about bullying in fiction and also in nonfiction advice. My favorite part of this book is that they include an adult as a bully, and they say that adults can also be bullies, which I think is important information for kids. Also in 2009, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to the Internet by Sharon Sindrich and illustrated by Allie Douglas. This, of course, became out of date very quickly. Facebook and Twitter became public in 2006. The iPhone released in 2007, so all of those were still very new. And Instagram did not launch until 2010. The period after this book came out was a period of big changes for the internet landscape. And of course, looking at it now, 15 years later, some of it is very amusing. But a lot of it, of course, still holds up. They have advice about internet safety, cyberbullies, and messaging. So there's safety information like what info is okay to share, how to stick to appropriate websites, and being wary of strangers. They talk about some trendy 2009 things like emoticons and different acronyms. They also suggest starting a private blog that you could share with your friends and family. They also warn against joining social networks and chat rooms, and they give advice on what pictures are okay to share. They also explain how pirating music is illegal and you shouldn't do it. I'm sure prompting some girls to say, wait, I can pirate music? Also in 2009, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Staying Home Alone. This was previously released in 2002 without the Smart Girls branding, but this is the version that I had as a kid. This book is by Dottie Raymer and illustrated by Lauren Schauer, and it gives advice about being safe and responsible when staying home alone, setting ground rules with parents, about what you're allowed to do, whether you should answer the door or the phone, advice for being responsible for your younger siblings. The book also talks about safety, so knowing emergency numbers and what to do if something goes wrong, some first aid tips, and if there's one thing American Girl is going to do when they bring up first aid, it's to recommend that you take a class with the Red Cross. Take a babysitting class. Take a first aid class. Go to the Red Cross or the local hospital and take a class. This book is not providing medical advice. Please do not sue us. Please go get an actual certification from the American Red Cross. Also, when it comes to safety, this book has a cross-section illustration of a house to show off all the different safety features in a house, and I loved this illustration. You know I love a cross-section of a building. The book also advises you to make responsible choices, like getting homework done, and gives some snack ideas that don't involve cooking. The book also includes a workbook in the back where you're supposed to fill it out with your parents about the house rules and agree on what's acceptable for you to do. Also in 2009, Tone Shift, A Smart Girl's Guide to Her Parents' Divorce, again by Nancy Holyoke and illustrated by Scott Nash. This explains divorce, talks about living between two homes, and step families. This is a repackaging of the Help divorce book from 1999, which means that a lot of this book is questions from girls, because the Help books were just reader-submitted questions. The book defines vocabulary, so divorce, separation, a lot of legal terms, and also explains why people get a divorce. Sometimes people drift apart, like you have probably drifted apart with friends, and sometimes people are fighting a lot. There's advice on different big emotions you might be having, like guilt, anger, wishing your parents would get back together, and the book also brings up talking to a therapist or a counselor. Then there's advice for moving and living in between two places. So setting new routines so both places feel like home, and staying organized when traveling back and forth. It also gives advice for if you're living between two homes and there are different rules between the two homes. And there's a quote submitted by a girl that says, "Your parents set different rules because they have different views on things. That's probably one of the reasons they divorced. You just have to deal with it. I found I actually like things being different at each place. They have different views. That's probably part of the problem." What a wise little girl who sent that in. There's also a section called Tug of War about how to deal with if your parents are using you to fight or compete with each other, and advises you not to try and manipulate your parents against each other. And I thought that was so cool that they included that, because sometimes American Girl can be a little bit optimistic, like implying that people are trying their best and hopefully you can work things out, kind of a thing. They're often realistic, like sometimes a friendship needs to end, sometimes bullying isn't going to stop on its own, but often there is a vibe where they're like hoping for the best in a situation. They don't always talk about more serious issues, like the family book. The family they're describing in that book, they're not talking about any big serious problems going on. It's just a happy family who sometimes fights, and here's some advice on that. They sometimes don't acknowledge if bigger or more serious things might be going on. And a lot of the divorce book is sort of optimistic. Things can be framed in sort of a hopeful way. The opening letter at the beginning of the book says that your parents loved each other once, and now that love lives on in you, which is a beautiful sentiment, but I think not true in all cases. So I love that this book acknowledged that the divorce might not be amicable. There might still be fighting, you might be in the middle of it. It might be really awkward and stressful, and some other more serious things, like maybe one parent doesn't want to see you or spend time with you. I love it when American Girl acknowledges things like that, because these are meant to be a resource, and definitely some girls are going to be dealing with situations that are more negative. This is also foreshadowing. The book also gives advice on your parents moving on and dating again, and step families, and how you might feel jealous or awkward. And again, the book is like, Your parent won't love the step family or the new partner more than you. And I was reading it like, oh, I hope so. I don't know. It was very sad reading this because I'm just imagining a little girl whose parents are getting divorced and she's sad. And one of them gave her this book. And hopefully they gave her this book because they love her and support her and are willing to answer any questions she has. But also maybe they just gave her the book and threw her to the wolves like, we're getting a divorce. Here's this book. It'll explain it. It's a weird perspective reading these books as a grown-up because you're like, oh, it's so hard being a child. You have no control over your life. So many bad things can be happening. Everything is so new and stressful. How are you going to deal with a new stepfamily or going to a boy-girl party? Anyway, tone change again. 2010, Smart Girl's Guide to Style. It's by Sharon Sindrich and illustrated by Shannon Lasky. This is about exploring your personal style, how to dress appropriately for different situations, and how to find clothes you like. This book takes a mixed media approach with the illustrations. There's a lot of photos of textiles, which is cute because it's, the clothes book. This book explains the fashion industry versus personal style. It feels a little bit like the Cerulean monologue from Devil Wears Prada. They give a visual guide to a bunch of different clothes, so the different silhouettes that pants can have, and dresses. It gives advice on dressing practically and with the right level of formality, shopping for clothes, researching beforehand and not wasting money on trends, how to deal with other people's opinions, like your peers and also your parents, and some generic clothing tips, like packing, emergencies like rips and stains, and closet organizing. I loved looking at all the illustrations in this book when I was a kid. I do now, and always have, dressed extremely boring, costumes for videos notwithstanding, but I like the idea of clothes. I like looking at clothes. Also in 2010, we get The Smart Girl's Guide to Parties. This is by April Lunston and illustrated by Angela Martini. This book is separated half and half into guest advice and hostess advice. It's about being a polite guest, planning a party, sleepovers, gifts, and attending formal events. One thing I always find funny about American Girl is they're very wholesome. They're very responsible. They are not trying to help you be cool. They are trying to help you be a respectful and polite kid. So they are very anti-rule breakers and gossip and cliques. There's a lot of advice about attending parties where people are doing bad things. They're like, tell them to stop, and if they don't stop, go help the parents in the other room. The book also gives a lot of gift ideas and ideas for party themes and activities, and advice for attending more formal events, like weddings, bat mitzvahs, and parties that are mostly boring adults. And they give some advice on some games to do to prevent boredom, like count how many times people use a certain word, or how many people are wearing the same color. I went to my friend's graduation recently, and during one of the events, the class speaker said that their graduating class had a bunch of people named John, and so then I'm like looking in the program and counting how many Johns there are. I'm like, well, that killed 2 minutes, all right? This book is kind of a cross between the manners book of how to be polite and respectful, and also the American Girl magazine of a bunch of fun ideas for things to do. Then in 2011, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Knowing What to Say by Patty Kelly Criswell and illustrated by Angela Martini. This gives tons of different scenarios and suggestions of what to say in speech bubbles. So small talk, asking for things, apologizing, standing up for yourself, and sad or awkward situations. American Girl as a brand, I think, is really good at sincerity. Everything in this book that has to do with heartfelt apologies or comforting someone is really solid. But they are, of course, not as good when it comes to humor. There's a 2-page spread of clever comebacks, like, FYI, it's a free country. That's impressive. Not. Have you ever heard of karma? My favorite example in this book is for when your family's embarrassing you. And one of the situations is, if your friend is over and your parents are disagreeing about some money issue, again, guess it's not a good day for grown-ups. They'll figure it out. How about we go play a game outside? Ah! You might need the divorce book next. Now we get into the era of Smart Girl's Guide books where I did not have them as a kid. So every Smart Girl's Guide book before this, I did have as a kid, other than the divorce one, because that does not apply to me. But at this point, I sort of grew out of the American Girl advice books. So these were all new experiences for me. So we start out with 2012, A Smart Girl's Guide to Liking Herself. This is by Dr. Lori Zellinger and illustrated by Jennifer Callis. This is a book all about self-esteem, combating negative self-talk, making friends, and practicing being more confident. It gives advice about setting goals and building up to doing hard things to help you build your confidence. It gives advice on retraining your brain to think positively about yourself, but it does say, if you tried and still can't seem to shake negative thoughts, talk to someone about it. Parents, teachers, school psychologists, social workers, school nurses, and guidance counselors are there to help. It gives a little bit of advice about making friends, and there are some conversation starters. And one of the conversation starters is, I'm trying to think of a food that begins with every letter of the alphabet, and I'm stuck on G. Can you think of anything? Can you imagine if you're just like sitting in the school cafeteria and someone says that to you? I'd be like, well, first of all, grapes, but second of all, what? The book also contains a cootie catcher in the back of the book that you can fold up. When I was a kid, we called these fortune tellers, but it has questions to ask that are about confidence. Do I want to tear this out and do this right now? Would I regret messing up this book? We're gonna do it. We're gonna live dangerously. Oh my god. I feel so dangerous. Oh my god, it's like muscle memory. Is this a complete waste of time? I have so much more script to get through. It's too late. I've already done it. What a throwback. Oh my god. Okay, pick a number. I couldn't hear you. I'm gonna pick for you. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, pick a word. The words are thoughtful, caring, kind, friendly. Uh-oh, I couldn't hear you again. Kind. K-I-N-D. Okay, same words. You have to pick again. Oh, what'd you say? Caring. Okay. If you could go anywhere, where would you travel with a friend? Well, I'm going to be traveling with friends. Soon-ish. So I guess London and France. Now I'm going to unfold this and put it back in the back of this book in case I need it again. Then, in 2013, the Care and Keeping of You book was split into 2 volumes. Book 1 for younger girls and book 2 for older girls. Book 1 is almost the exact same as the original, though they did have the art redone by Jose Massé. Don't know if I'm saying that right. I think she's French-Canadian. So it's the same art, but redone. It's not, they didn't do new art. Well, it's new art, but it's the old art again. They didn't completely redesign it. Does that make sense? I'm going to show it on screen. You're going to understand what I mean. The main difference, other than the art, is that they removed the information about eating disorders and the diagram inserting a tampon. Book 2 for older girls is by Dr. Carla Natterson and is much more text-based. There's way less illustrations. Some of the text is very small. I mean, the book itself, if you look, this is the original, this is book 1, and then this is book 2. So it's a lot smaller. And so there's some parts where they have the normal text and then they have like a little sidebar with smaller text. And that smaller text is small. The book is quite scientific. There is a glossary in the back. And this book covers types of hair removal. They have the tampon diagram. They talk about UTIs and yeast infections, body image, acne, emotions, and they tell you how to do a self-breast exam. They're like, you almost certainly don't have breast cancer, but if you want to get in the habit of doing a self-exam, this is how to do it, which I thought was cute. I was initially very concerned when I heard that they split the book up into 2. I was like, what important information did they take out? And the answer was that I think the way that they split it is appropriate. I am concerned that parents are going to only buy book 1 when I do think book 2 has a lot of great information, but it's not like book 1 lost tons of important stuff. I understand them cutting out the eating disorder and body image information. I think for younger girls, if that's not something they're already aware of, maybe let's not introduce that to them yet. And I guess I understand shifting the tampon instructions to be for slightly older girls. Then in 2014, we get the Smart Girl's Guide to Babysitting. This is by Harriet Brown with illustrations by Karen Wolcott. So this is actually the 1999 Babysitter's Handbook. They republished it once with new illustrations, still as the Babysitter's Handbook, and then changed it again to be part of the Smart Girls Guideline. The book also had a companion babysitter business kit and Super Sitter's Playbook. Just a lot of babysitting information over the years. This book talks about safety, entertaining kids, comforting them, and dealing with conflict. So the priority is being safe, so never leaving kids alone or being distracted. They give some first aid information and tell you that you should take a class with the Red Cross. They give some advice on things you should ask the parents about, food, potty time, bedtime, and a ton of tips from girls. And some of these girls sound like very impressive babysitters. For me, this book is not enough information. I need way more information. Kids are intimidating. I babysat one time. It was kind of disastrous. I mean, not that disastrous. I mean, it didn't go well, but like nothing bad happened. At some point, we were in the front yard and then out in the street throwing lemons that had dropped from trees at cars. And I was like, oh no, I have lost control of this situation. And they also lied to me and said, oh, we always get dessert after dinner. We should have ice cream sandwiches. And I'm like, oh my God, they're lying. That's crazy. Because I'm used to my brother, who is autistic and has very limited communication, and he doesn't lie. I forgot that kids can lie, which I did give them the ice cream sandwiches because I was like, I don't want to argue about this. I think kids can just sense a vibe from you if you're intimidated or scared or whatever. And I am. So then in 2015, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Drama, Rumors, and Secrets by Nancy Holyoke and illustrated by Bridget Berriger. The book plays on the other meaning of drama, so as opposed to interpersonal drama, theatrical drama. So a lot of the book is framed like a school play, which I think is very cute. So at the end of each section, we have scenes from a drama, and there's a girl in a director's chair, and it gives example scenarios. And also at the end of each section, there is rewrite the script, where on one side of the page, all the sad girls are like, this is just the way it has to be. Drama is inevitable. And on the other side of the page, all the happy girls are like, be the change you want to see in the world. We don't have to have drama. So this book talks about friendship, being in an accepting friend group, communicating your feelings, gossip, and ways you might be contributing to gossip, and how words on a screen are still real life. So be sensitive about messaging and social media posts. And there's advice on dealing with bullying, like keeping records of what happens and getting help from adults. In 2016, we get the Smart Girl's Guide to Cooking. This is by Patricia Daniels and Darcy Johnston, and illustrated by Elisa Chavari. This teaches vocabulary of tools and techniques, recipes, and planning menus. At first, they try to sell you on the idea of cooking. Like, it helps connect you to traditions. It's fun, it's healthy, it's delicious. It's like, yeah, it's food. I know what food is. I like food. You don't need to give me the hard sell. I'm on board. They talk about safety, kitchen safety, knives and appliances, raw food, having adult supervision. They teach vocabulary, tools like stock pots and strainers, techniques like measuring, mixing, knife skills, and heat. They provide some simple recipes and give advice on planning a menu, using a diversity of foods and textures and making something that is balanced and healthy. It also mentions different dietary needs, like allergies and preferences like veganism. They also have a page that I like about mistakes girls have made when cooking. One time, I was rushing and trying to make brownies quickly. I started making them and then realized I didn't have eggs or flour. Always make sure you have all the ingredients before you start. Amelia. Those are two of the big ones. That is really gonna hinder your progress. My dad and I were baking a cake, and instead of filling the pan halfway, we filled it all the way. The cake overflowed in the oven. What a mess. Sophia. So you don't know what you're doing because you're like 9, but your dad doesn't know what he's doing, and he's a grown man. So then in 2016, we have A Smart Girl's Guide to Worry by Judy Woodburn and Nancy Holyoke, illustrated by Brenna Vaughn. This is about dealing with different types of negative thinking and doing things that scare you. It explains what worry is and how it prevents you from doing things that you want to do, types of negative thinking like black and white thinking, perfectionism. They give some mindfulness techniques and advice on making progress towards doing things that scare you, like breaking them into small steps. So unfortunately, I don't like this book. I am someone who has had very bad anxiety since I was a very small child, and if you gave this book to a child with anxiety, I don't know how helpful it would be. Some of the examples in the book and quotes from girls seem like we're talking about quite serious worry, like perhaps clinical anxiety levels of worry. I spend half my life worrying. Sometimes life feels like too much to handle. They talk about being physically sick because of worry. So we're acknowledging that the worry might be quite serious. But then the advice that they give is, in my opinion, maybe not gonna cut it. They talk about changing thinking patterns and identifying when your thinking is irrational, which does not necessarily help. Sometimes that's the whole problem, is that it's irrational and you know it is, and you can't do anything about it. There's a comic in the book where a girl is worrying about a Halloween party that she's hosting and that people aren't going to show up or they're not going to be happy. And the positive alter ego of her is comforting her, like, maybe your friend can't come because she has other plans, or she's supposed to spend the weekend at her dad's house. It doesn't necessarily mean she doesn't like you. And it's like, thanks, Halloween witch alter ego. I know that intellectually. Doesn't help, though. I mean, these tips might be useful if you are a child and it has never occurred to you or been explained to you that the ways in which you are thinking do not accurately reflect the world around you. I think this book should have had more of an emphasis on talking to adults and getting help. They mention that one time when they are talking about setting goals to do things that scare you and breaking them up into small steps and making progress towards the goal. So, like, if you want to go to sleepaway camp, practice spending the night at your grandma's house, kind of a thing. And they say, do a step with a friend or parent by your side before you try it solo. Need more support? Ask a parent or counselor to help you find a therapist. A therapist knows how to help people plan steps and work their way through them. I thought they would say something kind of like the Feelings book, where if you're trying this and it's not working and you feel like your worry is running your life, talk to a trusted adult. You might need to talk to a therapist or a psychiatrist. I mean, already I feel like if you're worried enough as a small child that you need a guidebook about worry, I don't think that's a great sign for your mental health. Saying that as someone who was that worried as a child. I just feel like it should have been more obviously framed that this level of worry is not good and not normal. I'm afraid that a girl would read this book and be like, oh, I guess other people are this worried all the time, and that's a normal thing to experience. And the only solution is to practice positive thinking. And it's like, no, that is not the only solution. And I feel like a resource trying to help you with worry should be a place to explain that there is other help out there. I think maybe they're afraid to get too medical with it, or they don't want to encourage kids to like self-diagnose or something. But they have this kind of information in the Feelings book, so I don't know. It's really weird to me, and it makes me sad because this book would have been absolutely useless to me and would have just made me feel bad. Like, why is this not working? Is there something wrong with me? Yes, girl, you need to be on Lexapro. Like, that's what's wrong with you. Then in 2017, we have The Smart Girl's Guide to Getting It Together. This is by Erin Falligant and illustrated by Brenna Vaughn. This has tips on organizing your school stuff, your room, and your time. They have some flow charts for decluttering, like if a dog ate it, would you replace it? Setting up zones in your room for different activities, like sleeping and studying, which makes me feel bad because I never sit at this desk. I love laying down. I do everything laying in my bed. I know that's bad. I just need a secondary place to lay that's for work laying down, separate from sleep laying down. Then I'll be golden. They also give advice for if you're sharing a space or living between two homes and organizing things in that situation. And they talk about time management. It is a very straightforward book, very solid, nothing funny to say about it. Some of these books I read and I was like, well, that's all that was. Don't have anything interesting to say about that. What a great use of my time. Then in 2017, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to the Digital World. This is by Carrie Anton and illustrated by Stevie Lewis. Often American Girl republishes books over the years. So like around 2013, 2014, they changed the style of the Smart Girls guidebooks, and a lot of them got republished with different art and different covers. So they do things like that to keep things fresh. Sometimes they'll add a little bit of new content, especially those older books that are like pre-cell phone. And I did not feel the need to do every version of every book. However, there were a few books where I wanted to see different versions of them. And A Smart Girl's Guide to the Digital World is the new version of The Smart Girl's Guide to the Internet. And so I definitely felt the need to read it because I knew it was going to be quite different. I mean, it has a new title and everything. It's basically a different book. Of course, it is from 2017, so it is, again, already outdated. This is pre-AI and short form video. This is before kids took online classes during COVID. But again, a lot of this information is still very useful. It talks about safety and privacy, your digital footprint, and logging off. So they give advice about not sharing personal or identifying information. They give a few formulas for creating passwords. They give some warnings about your digital footprint and what things are smart to share. They talk about cyberbullies and internet trolls. Do people still say that? And they also talk about spending time offline, being too attached to your devices, finding a balance with the real world. And they even give some advice on good posture and stretches to do so that you're not like craning your neck or bending your fingers all weird. And this was fascinating because it was so different from the internet book, because now not just the internet, but also personal devices have become so ubiquitous that even kids need reminders to log off. Your digital footprint was not a concern in 2009 the same way it is now. I mean, not even now, 2017. I feel like this book, they just need to make a new version every few years. Maybe they don't need to completely redo it, but just like add in a little bit, you know? Also in 2017, we get Guy Stuff, the body book for boys by Dr. Karen Natterson and illustrated by Micah Player. So this is the care and keeping of you for boys, with virtually no indication anywhere that it is affiliated with American Girl, because then boys would not want to read it. And this is extremely similar to the Care and Keeping of You. Information about acne, hair growth and shaving, hygiene, and then obviously some stuff that is different from the Care and Keeping of You. Like in this book, instead of a breast growth chart, we get a penis growth chart. The art style is good. You can tell they tried to get a little bit more masculine. And the writing style, instead of being cool aunt, is maybe like cool older brother. Older brother who's gone away to college. He's back over the summer. He's talking to you man to man, bro to bro. And then Guy Stuff also got some companion books, like about feelings. Just building the American Girl puberty book empire. Then in 2018, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Sports and Fitness by Therese Kachak-Maring and illustrated by Brenna Hansen. This is about fitness, drills, competition, and sportsmanship. They give some reasons to exercise and play sports, nutrition and hydration, and the pressure to lose weight, injuries, terms for muscles and different types of training. They try to label the muscles on a drawing of the least anatomical body ever. It's like a blob. It's not even a diagram at that point. It's like, this is the different parts of the noodle leg. That's useless. The book also talks about parents being challenging, like them being upset with the coaches or refs, being too competitive and putting pressure on you, being mean to the other team. And the book also talks about positive thinking and good sportsmanship. Then in 2019, we get a new version of Smart Girl's Guide, Understanding Families. This time the title is Understanding Families as opposed to Understanding Her Family. It is by Amy Lynch and illustrated by Maike Plenske. I thought that since the title was slightly different, this was going to be more of a new version with new content. No, it is exactly the same, just with new art. And this is not a very meaty book, so I feel like you could have added stuff to it. There's a page at the beginning in all versions of the book about a family recipe, how families can be made up all different ways. And I feel like you could add some pages explaining divorce, step families, foster families, adoption, single parents, mixed cultures and heritage, the different people who might be in a household, maybe explain some of the problems that families might go through. Losing a job, losing a loved one. I mean, I understand that that's not what this book is trying to be. This book is not trying to be all about families and advice for family problems. It's specifically about conflict resolution and bonding with your family, which is fine, but I feel like this book could be more than it is. Then in 2019, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Travel. This is by Aubrey Andrus and illustrated by Stevie Lewis. It's about being prepared to go new places and try new things. There's advice on packing, how much to bring, what's a checked bag versus a carry-on, how airports work. There's explanations for a bunch of number things, like the metric system, time zones, currencies, tips on maps and transportation, advice on being respectful of different cultures, and wanderlust, being excited to explore. I feel like this is a great book, especially if you're like going on your first international trip with a kid. This can explain a lot of basic information, so they hopefully won't constantly be asking questions and will know to be polite. Then in 2020, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Crushes. This is the new version of A Smart Girl's Guide to Boys. The art was redone in 2013 by Alyssa Chavari, but at that point it was still called A Smart Girl's Guide to Boys. It was renamed in 2020. So it is no longer just for the heterosexuals. They have added in some gay stuff. They explain that you might have crushes on boys or girls or both. Don't feel pressure to find a label. There's a question from a girl who has a crush on a girl in her art club, but she doesn't know if she likes girls. And the advice is to get to know her better. Treat her like a friend. Eventually you'll learn how she feels about things like that. And you might come out of it a couple, or you might come out of it good friends. There's advice about coming out and finding community. And they've also added stuff about being careful online. Posts can be shared. People can be lying about who they are. Words can be misinterpreted. And I did notice 2 examples of language being updated. So in one, a girl is asking about a boy who unfreezes her during freeze tag, but also when he sees her says, "Hey, psycho." They changed that to say, "Hey, goofy." And then also one of the quotes from a boy where he's complaining about girls calling too much, they changed it to girls texting too much, which I don't think is the same thing. You can ignore a text and come back to it later. Constantly calling and having to be on the phone with someone is a different thing. I don't think it's fair to this boy back in 2001 to change his words to make it sound like he's annoyed when girls double text. In 2020, we also get A Smart Girl's Guide to Making a Difference. This is by Melissa Seymour and illustrated by Stevie Lewis. So American Girl had a few books in a row right in that 2020 area that were all woke books. Very socially conscious, into equality and change and anti-discrimination. And now the pendulum has swung the other way in American culture. So no more woke books. Maybe we'll get more in the future, but for right now, no. So this book explains what is activism and how to get involved in different causes. And they include stories from girls who made a difference in some way. There's a quiz to identify what kind of activist you are. The options are super social, so like spreading the word, down to business, so organizing, and all about art, so like designing things. They also explain the 3 categories of issues, 3 different scales they could be at, so at home and at school, in the community, and out in the world. They give advice on researching your cause, different ways to help, volunteering, donating, raising awareness, and collecting items like cans. And they also advise you to take breaks. The various issues they talk about in this book, a lot of it is like climate change focused. And they do mention school safety, but they don't specify safe from what. They don't want to touch that. So. Then in 2021, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Race and Inclusion. This is by Deanna Singh and illustrated by Shailen Ragni. This book is about what is racism and being anti-racist. This is a good book. It is categorized as 10 and up, and I am a little bit concerned that it's still a little bit advanced. There's a lot of vocabulary in here, a lot of information. There's also been an evolution within the American Girl Smart Girl's Guide series, where the books are more text heavy than they used to be. If you think about A Smart Girl's Guide to Boys, there's not a lot of text per page, and it's very dynamic. They make words really big, they stylize it in different ways. It's very approachable compared to big sections of text, especially when we know nationally we're sort of having a problem where the kids are having trouble with reading. I think this book would probably be strongest in more like a classroom setting, maybe slightly older kids, like middle school. But regardless, this book is very much coming from the perspective of teaching white girls how to be allies. American Girl knows their audience. This book very much expects the reader to be white. And the book explains what is race, racism, structural racism, and they introduce the characters of Madison and Sella. Then there's also this extended metaphor where you imagine society, American society, as a drama club. and a girl named Lucy is the president of the drama club. And she is in charge of handing out cookies to the members of the drama club. And she doesn't give any to Sella. And she gives the excuse like, oh, it's because she's a scatterbrain. Like, she doesn't deserve cookies. And the other members of the drama club go along with it. Then maybe later, Lucy is like, no cookies for anyone who looks like Sella. This cookie drama club metaphor is throughout the book. Sometimes it's just a drama club metaphor. It's not about cookies, and cookies being a metaphor for opportunity. So Sella doesn't get to try out for the lead role because Black girls can't play certain roles. I think that's the moment when the metaphor is the strongest because it connects to drama club, and then it's also a thing that happens in real life where people think that certain parts that were not written with any race in mind are meant to default to a white person playing them. I feel like maybe it would have been a tighter metaphor if instead of talking about giving out cookies, it was giving out roles and maybe costumes. Like, Sella doesn't get as good of a costume, and maybe Lucy is like, oh, she doesn't get to wear what everyone else is wearing because it's not going to look good on her skin tone. Or maybe Lucy says something about her hair, like her hair is too big and distracting. Like, if she wants the role, she has to straighten it. I think the drama club metaphor is good because I understand what they're trying to do. It's supposed to be a metaphor for kids, so it's involving their peers, so it's kids in the metaphor, and it would be a weird power dynamic if the person doing the discrimination was an adult, so it can't be like a teacher, which is why it's a club and a club president who is the peer group. But I just think the cookie part it's not that strong because it's not like drama clubs are known for giving out cookies. It could connect back to the casting part of the metaphor. Whatever. That element, we maybe could have tightened it, but that's fine. The book explains white privilege, so how Madison doesn't realize, but being white makes things in her life easier. And it specifically says, having white privilege doesn't mean your life is super easy or that you've never struggled. It just means your racial identity hasn't made your life any harder. It talks about living in a bubble of other white people and white media, implicit bias and microaggressions. It gives the advice to get help from adults when there is bullying and blatant discrimination. And when it comes to being an ally, listening and apologizing when you make mistakes, and staying strong even when friends and family don't want to be allies. Which is kind of bold that they put that in the book. I like that. This is a very dense book, covers a lot of different topics. I think it is, for the most part, very strong. I'm concerned because currently on the American Girl website, it is half off and it says final sale. So it feels like maybe they're going to stop selling it. Hopefully they're redoing it and not just discontinuing it, but I'm not overly confident. Maybe a simpler version, maybe with a glossary in the back. They do get negative backlash for this book. Like, there's negative reviews. I think you can guess what type of criticism the reviews are giving. Then I do feel like if they were to republish it now, it would like renew the backlash that they would be getting. Like, there would be a bunch of articles about like, oh my god, American Girl talking about how racism is bad, a thing the brand has been doing for decades. Then in 2022, American Girl released the Smart Girls podcast. There's a whole graveyard of post-2020 short-lived podcasts. Bunch of people buying podcast mics. I wouldn't know anything about that. Show lasted 10 episodes. It was inspired by the Smart Girls guidebooks, and it was hosted by Shea Rudolph, an actress who was in Netflix's Babysitter's Club show, so like a teen, and cultural expert / network producer Jess Weiner. And they occasionally have correspondent social worker Katie Hurley. And each episode, they talk about a different Smart Girls Guide-inspired topic, like friendship troubles, and they have on celebrity guests, like Malia Baker, who at the time was on Babysitter's Club, but now is in Descendants, and McKenna Grace. I listened to some of it. It's kind of a nothing podcast. I don't know. Maybe if you're 9 years old, it would be interesting, but also maybe it would be less interesting because at least I was listening to it for like research purposes. If you're just listening to it for fun, it's kind of not a lot of useful information and kind of slow paced and maybe not that entertaining. Then in 2022, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Body Image. This is by Mel Hammond and illustrated by Maki Plensky. This is about different bodies, taking care of yourself, and beauty standards. And it also includes stories from real girls. This book talks about the ways that bodies can be different, skin color, weight, disabilities. They talk about intersectionality. They talk about gender identity, gender expression, dressing in a way that feels comfortable to you. And if you feel like you might be transgender or non-binary, you should talk to an adult who can help connect you to a doctor who can help. There is medicine that can help delay puberty, and even if you've gone through puberty, there are things that doctors can help you with. This got backlash, of course. Obviously, people have negative feelings towards transgender people, but also people really hate when kids are exploring their gender identity in a way that often feels very controlling and not viewing children as their own individual people. Children can have their own opinions about themselves and who they are and their bodies. You do not suddenly become able to know who you are when you turn 18. You are often able to figure out things about yourself when you are much younger. This book also talks about food and disordered eating, self-expression like clothes and makeup, and beauty standards and how they're unfair and driven by money. I think this is quite a strong book. It's a bummer that they don't sell it anymore. And it only came out in 2022, so they got rid of it pretty fast. Also in 2022, we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Tough Stuff. This is by Erin Falligant and illustrated by Brenna Vaughn. This is about resilience and dealing with difficult things. This book is separated into sections with different scenarios. So school, dealing with pressure, perfectionism, being overbooked, body and mind, figuring out your gender and sexuality, peer pressure, depression, anxiety, social life and social media. She talks about cyberbullying, if you think a friend is in trouble, harassment, and a friendship ending. Close to home, divorce. Back in the day, got a whole book. Now you get 4 pages. If a loved one is sick or dies, or deployed for military service, parent loses a job, and abuse. And The World Today talks about pandemics, very easy to identify when this book was made, climate change, stress over school shootings, and helping after a natural disaster. This is a very strong book. It talks about a lot of dark, serious things that American Girl usually doesn't cover, and it does them very well. Very good advice. And then we get A Smart Girl's Guide to Taking Care of Herself in 2025. This is A Smart Girl's Guide to Tough Stuff, repackaged. So they've stopped selling Tough Stuff. Now it's been replaced with this. I thought I was going crazy reading it. I was like, I thought I've seen this before. Did I ever already look at this book? I didn't put any post-it note tabs in it. This book has been restructured to be about mental health. So all of the topics that Tough Stuff covered have been shuffled around, and some of the art has been reused from the Smart Girl's Guide to Worry book, because that's also by the same artist. They have removed the information about gender and sexuality, self-harm and suicide, harassment and discrimination, abuse, helping a friend in danger, military deployment, and job loss. They've also removed everything in the world section, though they kept the info about not obsessing over the news and natural disasters. And they've added in mindfulness and tips for communication with friends and family. This is a bummer. It just makes it a less useful book, because we already have available for purchase right now A Smart Girl's Guide to Liking Herself, A Smart Girl's Guide to Worry, and The Feelings book. We have so many intro mental health books from American Girl. We did not need a 4th one. Tough Stuff covered a lot of very important topics that girls do deal with. I mean, it's a bummer, but I think girls deserve advice on those things. I don't know if they got backlash. I don't know what happened, but it feels kind of cowardly to remove all the tough stuff and make a book that's just less tough stuff. And now it's basically the same as multiple other books you already could have gotten. And that's the most recent advice book they've published. Sorry to end it on a downer note. For all its flaws, I think the American Girl advice series is very strong and is very helpful for kids in so many situations. They are great resources for kids to have. I am happy that American Girl still publishes them, though, to be fair, they do not publish as many as they used to. Though, unfortunately, I do think that there's a general trend against reading right now. American Girl is just publishing less books in general. It's not specific to the advice series, which obviously I'm not happy about that either. I'm just saying it's not like we're targeting the advice books. Hopefully they will continue publishing more advice books and updating the ones they've already published. That's all I have for you today. A big thank you to my patrons. And a special shout out to Austin Poston, Checkered Omega, Court, Jillian, Megan, and Melanie Mermaid. If you didn't know, I have a Patreon where I post monthly bonus content and occasional free content. It's just another way to support me, no pressure. I'm Sarah Seraph on all social media. As always, the sources I use for this video will be linked in the description, and I don't know how to end a YouTube video. So, bye!